highlight of our APhA Institute year after year is in one of the evenings. So for us this year, it's Thursday evening. We actually take all of the attendees who are interested on a group hike up through one of the trails of the foothills of that's around Salt Lake City. And so the picture that you see on the screen is actually the peak that would be the top of the hike. So not everybody makes it to the top, but this is one of the most prominent foothill peaks that we have. It sits just behind the University of Utah, so you'll be able to see it throughout the entire session. And on Thursday night, we're actually going to take a large group up that hike. So if you'll go to the next slide, Keith. This is another view of it. So on the left, you see that another shot of that same peak, but you can actually see that valley there right in the middle. That's actually where the trail kind of winds its way through. It's a very beautiful hike. It's about 1,000 feet in elevation climb, and there's a lot of switchbacks, and it is kind of a rough dirt and loose gravel trail. So just to give you a kind of a sense of where we're going and what that canyon looks like. The picture that's on the screen right now actually shows you a couple of different angles. And so in the red circle there, that is where the dorms are, and that's actually where we congregate. So anyone that's interested in attending the hike will be there at 6 p.m. On Thursday night of the conference. And we're going to start there. From there, we're actually going to take a walk up the sidewalks and the streets around the university to actually get to the trailhead. And so those two blue dots that you see in the lower middle part of the screen are actually where the trail starts. We're going to go from the sidewalk to the gravel trail, and then you can kind of see the path that trail takes and a little bit of the elevation gain information. And so this trail, you'll take the same route up to the top that you take down to the bottom. And so you can kind of see that progression there. If you go to the next slide, Keith. These next couple of shots will actually show you a little bit more about what that trail actually looks like. And so this picture here is kind of at the beginning. You can see some folks actually pack sticks or whatever to help them. You can see as you get up into the trail, there's a lot more greenery. It gets a little bit more steep as you get into the trail. You can see there's some shady parts, but there's definitely some sunny parts. And so this just gives you a sense of kind of what people pack. Most of the folks will take a backpack up with extra bottles of water, make sure that they've got really comfortable, reliable tennis shoes. So going back to that shot that actually shows the trail itself, there are a couple of points that I wanted to highlight here. And so that bottom arrow that you see is actually a lookout, about 40% or so but, of the way of the hike. There's a really nice lookout that allows you to see all the way to the Great Salt Lake. You can see most of the Salt Lake Valley. It's a great spot for taking pictures, and you kind of get to stop and take a breather. Some folks, particularly folks that are from out of town or are not quite used to the elevation, this is a perfectly respectable place to turn around and go back down. So if you're struggling at all on the hike, or if if you're not quite sure of your footing or whatever, this is a good place to stop, enjoy yourself, take a breather, take some great photos, and then head back down. If you're interested in continuing, which I highly encourage that you do, you can continue on that trail and follow some more switchbacks and kind of back and forth. That second arrow that you see is another lookout. It's a little bit higher up. It's a little bit further into the trail. But that's a place called the living room. And you'll know it's the living room because folks that in the past have taken a lot of the loose rocks and boulders, and they've actually sort of turned them into little seating areas. You'll see benches and chairs, and that's right in front of another great lookout where you can again see the Salt Lake Valley. You can see a lot of the mountains that are to the south and north of these foothills, and it's a really beautiful place. Also a highly respectable place to stop and turn back around. From the living room or from that second lookout point, there are a subset of the hikers that will actually go on to the peak. And that's what you see, that last little jaunt there. The thing that I wanted to mention about that jaunt, Keith, if you'll go to the next slide, is that from the point of the living room up into the peak, you're actually off the trail. And it's more of a scramble, and so you have to use your hands and your knees and feet to kind of climb up to the top. And so you can see what that looks like. It's definitely not for a novice hiker. This is an intermediate to advanced level hike, particularly beyond that living room. But as Keith is sort of showing, the payoff is there. Once you get to that peak, the views are absolutely amazing. By that time in the evening, the sun will be starting to set. And so the sunset views, the distances that you can see. The Great Salt Lake is really, really gorgeous. And so for anyone who feels confident, who wants to go all the way to the peak, I encourage you to do that. So if you go to the next slide. This is just another shot. This is kind of that peak. So there's plenty of room for everybody to congregate. Lots of folks like to take pictures and hang out there for a little while. Again, catch your breath, rest up, and then head back down the trail. You're going to go right back down that same trail that you came up. So it's just one way up and one way down. If you go to the next slide. There are a couple of points of consideration here and just a couple of reminders. And so it's really, really important for this hike, particularly because the loose gravel and some of the rocks that can slide, that you wear comfortable sneakers or shoes with great tread on them. Hiking boots are always great, so if you've got a good pair of hiking boots, make sure you bring those along as well. It's a good idea to wear pants or long socks. As you can see, there's a lot of shrubbery and greenery along the hike, and particularly if they have a lot of moisture in the winter and early spring, there's a lot of growth that happens, and so it's easy to get your legs scratched up on some of that shrubbery. So if you've got pants on, then you can protect your legs. You want to be sure to apply sunscreen because much of the hike is exposed to the sun. There certainly are some shady spots, but for the most part it's in the sun. And the sun sets very late in the day. You have a good chance of getting a sunburn if you're not careful about applying sunscreen. And then the next pointer that we have is a very important one, and that's to bring lots of water with you. So bring at least 1 or 2 bottles of water. A Gatorade is always a good idea. Bring a small snack with you. There's a pretty good amount of vertical climb on this hike in a very short distance, and particularly because of the dry climate in Utah and in Salt Lake City in particular, it's easy to get dehydrated. And so make sure you have lots of water. If you run out of water, it's a good time to turn around and start heading back to the base. Don't forget to bring a camera. The views are amazing, and if you're not used to the mountains and you're not used to the geography of Utah, it's a really good thing to capture and share with your friends and family later on. Always make sure that you stay together. Don't go by yourself. Make sure you've got a buddy or 2 buddies and travel in that group. So if you have someone that's ready to turn around, it's make sure that you've got a partner to go with you. Stop often. It's better to take small, frequent stops and to catch your breath than it is to wait until you're completely exhausted. So stop regularly throughout the trail. I don't know of anybody that goes all the way up and all the way down without stopping. So be sure to check in and stop as often as you need to. It's always a great idea to bring a flashlight, and I'll talk about this a little bit in a second, but that sunset, once it sets, it's dark. And if for whatever reason, you start a little bit late down the trail, it's great to have a flashlight as a measure of safety. I hope you don't ever have to use it, but if that happens, then a flashlight can really help you out there. Keep your eye out for snakes. This is a rattlesnake breeding ground, and there are frequent reports of rattlesnakes in the area. I don't worry as much with a large group like we are because we make a lot of noise and a lot of ruckus, and the snakes don't necessarily want to socialize with us. And so I have seen snakes on the trail while I was alone, but I've never seen a snake with a group as large as ours going up the mountain, but it's still always important to keep your eye out and your ear out for rattlesnakes, and certainly stay away from them if you do encounter one. As I mentioned, use the buddy system. Prepare and just go in with the expectation that you're going to get sweaty. This is a bonding experience with everyone else that's going on the hike with you. It's really fun because there's a lot of folks that you'll see that have never been on a mountain quite like this one, or have been on a hike quite like this one, and so it's a really fun bonding experience, and so just plan for that. It's going to be sweaty. And then also, as I mentioned, to bring a lot of water on the hike. Go ahead and start hydrating as soon as you get into Salt Lake City, and particularly on Thursday, hydrate all day long. Even if you're not feeling thirsty in the morning and in the early afternoon, that will pay off for you while you're on the hike, particularly if it's a warm afternoon. It's easy to get dehydrated, and then that will surprise you later. You'll get cramping. Some people get really dizzy, and it can really kind of cramp your style a little bit on that hike. Go to the next slide. So in terms of logistics, we're all going to meet at the dorms. So the Sage Point dorms, there's a quad area or a lawn area that all of them kind of open up into. that's where we're going to meet. We're going to start there at 6:15 on Thursday evening. And I would encourage you to get there by 6. Meet up with your buddies or your team and kind of get your game plan together. We're going to want to start our hike right at 6:15. So as you can see, in years past, we always get the group together and take a group photo, and so this year will be no different. So Keith and I will be there to organize everyone, but the faster we can take the photo, the faster we can get on the hike, and the more time we'll have to spend on the mountain taking photos and doing more fun stuff. The other thing that I'll mention about the hike is it is completely optional. There is no credit or no pressure to attend if you're not comfortable. And we do ask that all of the attendees actually complete a waiver prior to the hike. So you'll see that waiver available online. We'll have some copies in Salt Lake City for you to sign. But one of the things that we ask is that if you're going to participate on the group hike, that you sign the waiver. And it just makes sure that you understand that there are risks associated with hike of injury, illness, and so we want to make sure that you go into that process with eyes wide open, and that's what that waiver is all about. So if you have any questions about the hike or that process, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Keith or myself. And then this next photo that you see here is actually just a picture of the trail. One of the things that, again, I'll remind you about is to be very careful and watch out for rattlesnakes. It's hard to see the rattlesnake that's actually in this photo. I took that picture myself, but there is a little guy sitting off to the left of that trail, and I heard him actually before I saw him. And they blend in very well with their surroundings. And so, again, it's just a great idea to keep your eyes and ears open for that, and to give them a good distance if you do encounter one of those things. So certainly something to be mindful of. Okay, so if that hike or that sort of strenuous activity doesn't quite sound your speed, we do have another really cool activity that happens at the same time as the hike. And that's actually a walk or a tour through the Red Butte Gardens. And so the Red Butte Gardens are a large botanical garden that is managed by the University of Utah. It's right there near where the dorms are. And so as an alternative to the hike, we actually take a group up there. So it's very peaceful, it's very calm. There are oftentimes musicians that are out there kind of playing their instruments, and you get to walk through various themes of the botanical garden and see lots of statues. It's a really nice, pleasant way to spend the evening. Interestingly, you can usually see the hikers go up the trail from the Red Butte Gardens, and so they're always trying to wave at us, and they take our pictures from that vantage point. So it's a really nice, pleasant evening as well. The tickets to the Red Butte Gardens are $6 per ticket. So if that's something that you're interested in, actually Charlie Broussard, who was one of the APhA staff volunteers, actually manages that program, and he will be able to get you a ticket for $6. So you can go to him with any questions that you have about the Red Butte Gardens. So with that, let me stop there, and we'll take any questions that you have about the Red Butte Gardens or the hike itself, and then we'll move on.
The first question is, what is the elevation of the peaks?
Good question. So the Salt Lake Valley is at about 4,500 feet. The University of Utah is kind of on the edge of the valley, and so we see a little bit of elevation gain. And we start the hike at about 5,200 feet. We ended at about 6,200 feet. So there's about 1,000 feet of elevation gain in, I would say, about 1.5 miles of distance. And so it feels vertical while you're in it. And yet, you know, it also feels like you're climbing more than 1,000 feet.
Next question is from Miles. Miles asks, will there be mosquito spray available, or should we bring or buy our own for the hike?
I would recommend that you bring some. Anecdotally, Utah is not known for having a huge mosquito problem. They've got a very dry climate there. But if you're sensitive to mosquitoes, or if you're one of those folks that the mosquitoes seem to be very attracted to, then it's a good idea. But we don't have any there. I would recommend that you bring some of your own.
Yeah. Heather George asks, how long is the hike?
Good question. So we start the hike at 6:15. I'm actually glad you asked that question. And sun sets just before 9 p.m. on that night, according to the almanac. And one of the constant or sort of annual concerns that we have is making sure that everyone gets off the top of the hike on time. so that they can actually get to the bottom before the sun sets and it gets too dark. And so while we're going to start the walk at about 6:15 or shortly thereafter, after we take that group photo, we have about an hour and 45 minutes or to 8 o'clock to get to the top. And at 8 o'clock, Keith and myself and the APhA staff members that are there are going to start kind of kicking people off the mountain and have people start their way back down. So at about 7:50, 10 of, we're going to say wrap up your photos, make sure you do all of, take all the pictures you want to take and say hi to everybody that's at the top, start preparing for your walk back down. If you're not on the way down by 8 o'clock, then you're behind schedule. And so we'll start giving reminders at 10 of, 5 of, and at 8 o'clock, people are going to be expected to start walking down. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to walk down, and so you should be off the mountain by 8:45.
And can you just repeat, like mile-wise, how long it is for your estimate?
Sure, it's about 1.5 miles between the trailhead and the peak, and so it's about 3 miles total, and it's about 1,000 feet elevation gain.
Great, thank you so much. Tiffany asks, should we be concerned with dangerous spiders?
That's a good question. It's certainly always something to be mindful of, but I've not seen a lot of spiders personally on the hike. I've done this hike probably 50 times. I used to live in Salt Lake City, and I've not encountered a lot of spiders or a lot of like bees or bugs or anything like that. It's pretty mild in that regard. The snakes are probably the bigger concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Missy. That brings us to the end of our webinar this evening on the APhA Institute experience.